Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In his name, I begin with the best of blessings upon the noblest of prophets, Muhammad, and his holy progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, dear sisters and brothers. Welcome to joining us to another segment of Her Narrative, Her Story. Inshallah, today we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting topic that I know has caught the attention of a lot of people, perhaps for the wrong reasons. And we need to understand that we've always done these types of programs where we talk about taboo and misunderstood issues. In the past, we've done programs looking at domestic violence, addictions, different mental illnesses. And today we're going to take a look at abuse. We've looked at hard-hitting topics such as racism. We've seen the impact on it on the social, the political, and the mental level. And it's forced us to look deeper within ourselves and within our communities to start the process of much needed change and awareness. We have spoken and discussed these topics with survivors of domestic violence, like we said, bullying and harassment. And with these hard-hitting topics, we now discuss the topic of mental health, which includes topics such as depression, suicide, again, domestic violence. And we see how openly these have been spoken about within the communities in order to bring awareness and also to help those who are suffering in silence. It's also time we openly talk about abuse and abuse against converts or reverts. The goal and the outcome for this program today is to understand what abuse is first. We have a guest speaker who's going to be talking about her lived experience of abuse as a revert. We're going to be taking a look at what signs to watch out for in abuse and what to do about it. What this program today is not about is an expose or a tell-all or pointing fingers at anybody or any groups. That is not the goal of this program. It is to understand these social issues better in order to finally do something about them, and also to prevent tragedies, to prevent these different challenges within our communities. What has been interesting is what I've been calling the resistance response to this specific program and what it shows and what it could mean. Perhaps it shows that the community and people are not ready to delve into deeper topics around mental health, or perhaps to admit and face the results of their actions because they feel it makes them look bad. The reality is that these things are happening anyways. To push them under the rug doesn't make them go away, but rather it will make things worse and it will explode. This is analogous to what you could say in psychology or in the psychotherapeutic process is when you are resisting, you are denying or pushing away, ignoring the challenges, the trauma, or whatever it is that you're experiencing that's causing you a lot of stress and pushing it and blocking it, it's going to come back and hit you harder. It could show up in the form of anxiety, perhaps post-traumatic stress disorder or depression, perhaps even lead to suicidality and these types of thoughts and the actions that come after that. So it's really important that we don't push away or deny or ignore, but rather, just like what we have seen this past year with racism, and understanding that although it is taboo and awkward or cringe-like and makes you feel very uncomfortable to talk about, we need to rip that Band-Aid off, just like Sheikh Nur Muhammad did a few months back, where people did not like what he had to say, but what he had to say was the truth. And there was a lot of controversy around that. There was a lot of support, and there was a lot of no support, you could say. The reality is this kind of talk will get people to delve deeper, to research, to reflect, to think about their actions and the things that they are unconsciously aware of, in the sense that they are doing this type of behavior and hurting others. And we see in the last few months, alhamdulillah, that there has been more talk and discussion around racism, how it impacts people on so many different levels, the social, the political, including mentally, how it impacts people. With these types of discussions, we are slowly seeing change in the larger community, but also within the Muslim community. I know in the larger community, there's been a lot more awareness in terms of looking to hire people of color to represent and to provide services for people of color. We know within our communities, alhamdulillah, with this type of awareness, there has been more reflection, including having discussions, but also changing things in our system. Today's discussion on abuse is with the same spirit. We need to understand what abuse is. The technical definition of abuse involves the interactions in which one person behaves in a cruel, violent, demeaning, or invasive manner towards another person or even an animal. The term most commonly implies, of course, physical mistreatment, but it also encompasses sexual, psychological, or emotional mistreatment. How does abuse impact a person? Well, mentally, it is the systemic destruction of a person's self-esteem or their sense of safety, and it often occurs in relationships where there are differences in power and control. Research shows, of course, the neurological, the physiological, and the mental changes that occur with the excretion of the stress hormones that are released because of this pressure of these actions. Now, we know that stress hormones, excuse me, the continuous excretion of these stress hormones, what they do to our system is very detrimental, which can lead not only to physical illnesses, but also mental illnesses, such as major depressive disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and of course, suicidality. So it's important to understand this so we know how to get the support for it and how to get out of it. And these are some of the things that we'll be looking at today. So our guest today, Amy Hodgkins, she's from the UK and she is currently a language teacher. And in the past, she was a speaker and a media personality. Today, she is bravely joining us to talk about her experiences as a revert and the abuses that she has encountered. Welcome, Sister Amy. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know this has been a very challenging time for you, yet you took the time and the effort to explore this topic further with the goals that we had in mind today in order to bring more awareness about abuse and what to do about it to help others, inshallah. So you've publicly spoken about your conversion story, and that has been very inspirational for a lot of people. Yet we don't hear much about the challenges that reverts experience in a public manner. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges that you had experienced?
Okay, so to begin with, I want to make it very clear that I am not here to vilify a whole group of people just because I have had some terrible things inflicted upon me. From my conversion story, I converted 4 years ago, nearly 5, and I've had plenty of positive experiences during that time where I've had people reach out to me who have really moved me by their kindness, by their compassion, and I've met some incredibly inspirational women as well who, even to this day, even though I've gone through so many challenges, they have never left my side and they're still supporting me here today as well. And I am so incredibly grateful to God that God gave me those women who are with me now, because I honestly don't know what I would do without them. So I'm not here to vilify a whole group of people. But nevertheless, I feel it is a duty not only to myself, but to others as well to speak about the truth of what happened with me, because I was, during my time as a Muslim, kind of later down the line, I was heavily discriminated against. One of my goals was to get married. I was very sincere about it. Anyone who knows me knows that it was just a huge priority for myself. And this is when I started to face discrimination because of my background, the fact that I'm white, that I'm English, that I'm a revert, and that I'm not from a Muslim family. And that was incredibly difficult to bear, it scarred me for a long time. I thank God that I can sit here and say that I've healed so much and I'm an entirely different person to who I used to be. I'm thankful for that. But for most of this, I felt very alone. And I tried, and I had to navigate these events and these situations pretty much by myself, with my friends with me, of course, but it's not as if I had my dad or someone who was a mahram with me to protect me. And I wish I could have had that, because it's a really hard burden to try and protect yourself just by yourself, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially coming from a family where it's, like you said, a non-Muslim family that is very different in culture, in tradition, in knowledge of how it all works, right? Now, you mentioned, Amy, that when you were trying to get married, that's when the challenges started to really become amplified. You mentioned that you were discriminated against before because you were English and white. So how did this all make you feel? And what were the challenges that you experienced when you were trying to get married?
So honestly, it was such a shock to the system, because for me, when I initially decided I wanted to be a Muslim, I didn't have any Muslims around me. I was literally in my bedroom, in my house that I rented when I was at university, and I made that decision. And simply put, I expected a lot more from Muslims than what I experienced. Now, again, I'm saying this again, I'm not vilifying a whole group of people. I'm not saying all of the Muslims that I met were absolutely terrible. I'm not saying that, but still, this needs to be addressed. It's important. This is
And it's a
the
common thing.
situation.
And this is a common thing I hear from convert stories over the years. I mean, not just yours, that there are a lot of challenges, including this, not feeling included and feeling isolated in the different groups. And it is a common challenge that a lot of reverts experience. Absolutely. And like it's not, like you said, from everybody. It happens in different pockets. I've seen this here in my own city in Ottawa. So over the years, we had a lot of Black Muslim reverts, and there was almost no space for them to be included. Now it's different. There's been a lot more young people who've created the space for this need to be met, right? So absolutely, this is a common story that we hear. Yeah, please do go on.
Yeah. So yeah, I really was. Yeah, you could say that I was naive. I'll admit it. I guess like I was a bit of an innocent, and I just assumed that, you know, that Muslims, they wouldn't discriminate and treat someone so poorly simply because of a skin color or an ethnicity or a family background. But I experienced it not once or twice, but honestly, it was just one thing after another with me. And it especially sickened me because I kept reminding myself that the Prophet Muhammad and his Ahlul Bayt, they never treated people like that. They treated everyone as their equals. So it's like reading about them in a book and then seeing the reality before you, even if it's just a minority of people who are doing that to you, it has a huge effect on you. And which I'll go into those things a little bit later. But
as you're saying that, it reminds me again of the different people of color that come into Islam, and they talk about similarly what you're saying, is that they've seen one thing in what they've read and learned, and then there is another in practice. And again, we could extrapolate this and give the example of perhaps so many other examples that we see in not just our community, but any community, where you see one thing in terms of what it's supposed to be, but another thing in practice. And that's hypocritical. That's a hypocrisy that we see not just in here, but we see it everywhere. We see it everywhere. Yeah, absolutely. And so how did that make you feel continuing on with that, in terms of when we were talking about the challenges when you were trying to get married, Amy. Like, how did you work on that?
Well, I didn't approach it in the best way, to be honest. It was just horrifying. I can't stress that enough, because it's not as if I can go and change that. I can't just go and change my whole background, my whole ethnicity, and I shouldn't have to do that, because these things don't matter. They honestly don't matter. If there was such a thing as a particular group of people being superior to another, then God would have made everyone of that particular race or that background. But no,
Right.
God loved us and made us all different so that we can get to know each other. You know, so I can't stress how horrifying that was. And honestly, I think it really did impact me on a subconscious level. And I started to kind of just feel ashamed about me, about my background, about my heritage. And I was only really comfortable talking about kind of my family background with kind of those people that I trusted. And I think as well, you know, for a while, in a way, I wasn't my authentic self. In the sense, like, I feel like not on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, I tried to kind of like be more like the people who were around me, which fair enough. Like, I think there is beauty in all different types of backgrounds. And I think you can take lessons from various different ethnicities and cultures, but you shouldn't be ashamed of who you are and your background when you haven't done anything wrong. That is something that I've really had to make peace with, and I thank God. Like, I'm honestly so proud of who I am right now, and I don't care if that sounds arrogant. I am genuinely proud of what I've achieved and what I've overcome. But anyway, that's a side issue. With regards to specifically talking about marriage, the main problem was I was very sincere. I always have been, but in terms of the guys that came my way, I should be more English teacher here. I should say males. The males that came my way. Sorry, I don't want to call them men, because you know how it is.
There's a difference, and I always talk about that. There's a difference between being a man and being a gender of a male. Same thing, there's a difference between being a woman and a female. Absolutely. Please do go ahead.
So either these males approached me directly, or through friends, or through women in the community that I was in, introduced me to them. What I tended to find was, to begin with, it would be very positive, and these males, they'd praise me a lot. They would show a lot of respect. They'd be very polite, and I would think to myself, oh wow, this is lovely, this is positive. But it just seemed to be a recurring pattern that, just without kind of any warning, they would just kind of flip the script. And to begin with, they would be like, oh, you know, yes, you're a wonderful Muslim woman. I respect you. I want to get to know you for marriage, yada, yada, yada. But then literally they would do, I want to give like a specific example here. So I had this experience with one guy that I met a couple of years ago, who approached me directly. To begin with, this is genuinely what he said. I'm not exaggerating. He said, I would really like to get to know you for marriage. I want you to come and meet my family. I want to come and speak to your parents. We talked for a bit, and then just without warning turned around and said, do you know what, actually, I'm not interested in you for marriage. I would like to use and abuse you. And those were those exact words. I'm not making this up. That was the message that he sent me. And of course, because I thought that was just a one-off, but no, that happened to me multiple times. And of course, back then I was incredibly hard on myself. I blamed myself, and I thought to myself, what did I say or do for him to change so suddenly towards me? I didn't understand. I just didn't understand. And that's the thing. I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just these individuals that they just like to play games with people, unfortunately. Let's just say the truth of the situation. There are some out there, they just want to play games with people's lives, and it's disgusting. They don't understand how that has an impact on someone.
Absolutely. You know, as you're speaking, Amy, again, when hearing your story, it reminds me of what happens with the widows and with divorcees as well, in terms of how they're approached, and perhaps with the initial showing of interest for marriage, but then you hear this kind of language, or you see this kind of behavior. And this, I see it again and again and again with the women that come and talk to me about their challenges. And an interesting word you said is a pattern. I'd call it an illness, not a pattern. An illness that we have where males feel that they can approach females for this matter, and it's complete lack of respect. And then you see how it projects onto you as the person at the receiving end, that you feel like, as you described, shamed, like you've done something wrong. Whereas you see the use of power here, you can see the impact of it. And this is definitely part of what we call, in terms of mental or psychological abuse, where this person is using their position to demean another person, to lower that person's sense of self, their sense of dignity.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry you had to experience that. And I know for a fact those men and women out there who are listening and watching this, that they can relate to that. Those who have gone through such a thing, who have seen this in the greater community. And it's an illness that needs to be taken care of, because we see how it can impact people. And as a psychotherapist, I see the impact of this type of abuse on people and what it does to a person's sense of self. Absolutely. I mean, when you're told you're just a side piece, or to be used like that, where's the dignity in that? And I could only imagine how it made you feel. Like you probably felt perhaps rejected, that you felt like you weren't good enough for marriage.
Yeah.
What did you do about it? What did you do about it, Amy? When these incidences happened, what did you do about it? Did you talk to anybody about it?
I did talk to the couple of friends that I had around me, and
but outside of your friend circle, did you mention this? Because part of what we want to do today is for those people who are experiencing this type of abuse, what to do about it and what not to do. So at the time when you were experiencing, yes, your friends, but outside of your friend circles, did you talk to anybody about this issue? Like, is there a place that you could go to inform that this was happening to me? What do I do about it?
At the time, I went to several centres for majalis quite regularly at that time. And I would try to, because I had a lot of women come up to me to kind of like strike conversation with me, because I looked different from everyone else. I would try and kind of talk to them about it and kind of understand like why this was happening to me. And I remember this one particular. I remember this one particular occasion with this older lady. She basically said to me that you're going to have to get used to it, because that's what the vast majority of these men are like. And I just thought, I didn't even know how to respond to that. I was like, I don't want to get used to this. This isn't normal. It's not normal to be feeling this way. It really made me feel rejected, and I couldn't talk to my parents about it. And my parents, like, they knew that there was something wrong with me, but for a long time I kept it zipped, because I was so scared of my parents having a negative view of Islam. I was really, really scared about that. So I couldn't talk to them. But now, being in the position where I am now, I do know that kind of like the best thing to do in this kind of situation with anything, if it's full-scale abuse, or even if it's just something that concerns or worries you, like, there are professionals, there are counsellors, life coaches, therapists in the Muslim community. I'm sitting talking to one right now that people can reach out to, and I really would recommend that, because I did try very much to try and deal with it by myself, and
it's a tricky situation.
I wouldn't recommend that.
Amy, it's a tricky situation from people who are from Muslim families, who've grown up in the community, to see that at a certain time in their life or age. When you see and hear that, it's shocking to begin with. So I can only imagine as somebody from outside who's come in to see this type of behavior and to be told you have to get used to it. That's normal. It's not normal. It is common, but it is not normal, and it is not acceptable. And the few who do that are absolutely bringing a bad name to Muslims as a whole. But we have to understand that a few bad apples does not represent everybody else. And that's key to understand. And you recognize that when you said that you didn't want to share this with your family because you were afraid they would have this impression, negative impression. And I think that's why, perhaps part of why people don't speak up about these types of things, is because they're afraid of what this could look like in the whole of the faith. So we need to understand here, there's the faith, and then there are the people who practice the faith. Completely different story. And that needs to be that understanding of it. Just because a few people said side piece to you, or women were saying to you that this is normal, get used to it. No, this is not normal. This is not acceptable. And this does not represent the faith, just because a few people do that. Now, I can imagine, having gone through that experience, like, how were you feeling about marriage at this point?
I just lost all hope in it, to be honest. I had this sincere dream that I'm just a normal human being. I just want to have a home, and I want to feel, yeah, I'm a strong woman, but I think every woman in this world wants to have a man there who's going to protect her and look after her, you know? And I wanted that family, and I wanted to have the pride of knowing that my children and their children and their children would be Muslim because I converted. I really, really wanted that, and I honestly just wanted. I've always wanted to make the world a better place. I always have. It's always been in me. It still is in me now. But I completely lost hope.
You're losing hope. Yeah.
And I just, for a long time, like, my heart was just shutting down, and I started just to become so fearful. Like, is this my life? Am I always going to be on my own? And it's like, in the times when this kind of things happened, or I remember, like, in this one particular case when I'd actually rejected a brother, not because he'd been, like, inappropriate towards me or overly sexual. He hadn't, but I had rejected him because I had my reasons to. I don't really want to disclose what, because it's very specific.
And you're allowed to have your reasons to say no to somebody for marriage. Absolutely.
Yeah. I had my reasons for it, and I knew it was the right decision, but it was just when I did that, when I tried to assert myself, sometimes what would come back at me was sometimes, in this particular situation, I was harassed by this person. It started blowing up my phone, started to get their friends to blow up my phone. The thing that scared me was when he said, like, "Oh, you live in, I'm gonna try and see where you live, and we can talk about this face to face." Now, I lived up by myself, and coming home from work, where I used to finish work very late, and with that in the back of my mind, like, that really frightened me.
Of course it would. Yeah, absolutely.
and over time, it just kind of made me more hesitant to kind of stand up for myself and put boundaries in place. And that just makes you even more vulnerable.
Sounds like, a lot of this behavior took its toll on you mentally, and that you experienced both the mental and the psychological abuse when you were told these things. Were there other forms of abuse? I see that people are asking these questions in terms of, were there other forms of abuse that you experienced, and how did it impact your family?
Well, like I said, my parents, they knew that things weren't right with me, and honestly, it nearly destroyed my mom and dad. They said to me that they just saw me just go downhill. They just saw me just wither and just like waste away, really, like from a kind of like a soul level. And I won't sugarcoat it. Like I tried to commit suicide several times in the last few years. So they nearly saw their daughter die. They saw their daughter being ripped apart, and they couldn't do anything about it. So what these people who abused me have to understand, you didn't just affect my life. Not that they affect me now, thankfully, but they affected my mom and dad. And my mom and dad, they're getting older. They don't deserve that. And that's the thing. When you hurt someone, when you abuse someone, you're not just abusing that person. You're hurting the people that are around them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bless your family. Yeah. As a parent, as a mom, a young mom myself, just imagining if somebody were to hurt my daughter in any way, how that would make me feel. Very livid, angry, broken, hurt inside. I can only imagine how your parents must have felt seeing you get to the point of depression from all of the stress and abuse that you wouldn't want to live anymore. That bless them, and can only imagine how overprotective they were of you at that time. They still are, bless them.
They still are. The fact, when I told them that I was doing this show, my dad said to me, he was like, "Are you going to get hurt from this?" Like,
and that's something we spoke about as well. Yeah.
No, I know they're downstairs and they're gonna breathe a sigh of relief when we're done here. Bless them. But
bless them.
Yeah. So that's how it impacted my family. But in terms of the abuse
for you,
the vast majority of what I faced was emotional abuse. So kind of the discrimination against me, against my background. It's important to also note as well, I remember on one particular occasion, this particular person thought that it would be a good idea to actually insult my parents as well, and say that my parents had not raised me right. And the reason why he had said that was because I called him out about his behavior towards me. That he was crossing my boundaries, even though I was very much saying like, no, I'm not happy with that. It would follow with like an apology, like, oh, I'm so sorry. But then like the behavior would be repeated. And so
it sounds like there's a contradiction there of their words. They apologize, but their behavior, and this is very common for the profile of an abuser in terms of coming to apologize. And we hear this, for example, I know this is not the situation here, but we hear this in domestic violence situations where the abuser, whether it's male or female, would come and apologize for their behavior, yet they repeat the behavior. And this shows again how they're crossing their boundaries and how they're absolutely disrespecting the person. It sounds very closely to that. Yeah. What else did you experience in terms of this type of, you said they cross the boundaries, disrespect you, they apologize, but repeat the behavior. What else did you notice?
So let me just give an example of what I mean there. So there was one occasion I remember, this was, again, this was a couple of years back. I remember going to bed the one night and my phone went off in the middle of the night while I was asleep. And of course, at that time of night, you think to yourself, like, oh my gosh, what has happened? Because who calls you in the middle of the night? I picked up the phone to this particular person who had been introduced to me. And this guy tried to coerce me into having phone sex with him. I had not consented to do anything like that with him before. I hadn't given him any reason to think that I would be okay with that. I didn't want that. But he tried to do that. And at the time, I should have got angry about it, but I didn't. I kind of just froze a little bit and I just said, like, all I could manage to say was, like, don't say anything you're going to regret in the morning. And then I put the phone down and I went back to sleep. That's when I woke up the next morning to messages like apologizing, like over dramatically, profusely, and I was just too nice for my own good. I should have kind of been firmer in saying that, no, that's not right how you treated me in that moment. But I didn't stand up for myself nearly enough. And the ironic thing is, about a month after that happened, this particular person, we weren't talking or anything like that at this point. I was really not interested in him. I didn't rate his character at all. A month later, he sends me a message going, can we talk? And I was like, and I thought to myself, oh God, what does he want? And this is when he said, by the way, I'm getting married soon, so can you just not tell anyone about how I treated you? I don't even know how to respond to that. I honestly don't. There's just, I don't know how you can just lack that compassion with someone. I really don't.
I usually have a lot to say. I don't know how to respond to that other than this person was afraid of their behavior, perhaps. They were afraid to be called out publicly. I don't know. All I could do is say, Allah yahdi, may God guide him and not kind of do this behavior again. And this is a form, again, of a type of abuse where, again, you're using your position where you are to demean another person, and it's not acceptable. Again, I'm sorry you had to experience that, and it's again, not normal, but it's a common story I hear of women who are, let's say, reverts. So many revert sisters have approached me with this type of nonsense, but I also hear this from divorced women as well in the community. Somehow people get their phone numbers and think that this is okay to do. Oh.
A lot of oh, are you okay, Berak?
Yeah. No, I'm still my seasonal cough when the weather changed, and just like my disgust with this. Amy, I'm going to ask you something a little bit more sensitive, if you're okay to answer. You've talked about, the verbal stuff that you've heard, mentally how people would say things to you, crossing your boundaries. You mentioned how when you were setting boundaries, how people came back and did that. I also understood, you've told me before, that people spoke behind your back. When you confronted, they responded with anger. And also there's a lot of gaslighting as well when you would call people out or you'd say, hey, this is not okay. And you also mentioned there was some physical as well. You're okay to kind of, we're not getting into details, but just the overall in terms of how it made you feel and how you work through it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. There was an incident, yes, where I was physically attacked by someone, and this led to a sexual assault, me being involved with a sexual assault. Yeah. I didn't tell anyone when this happened. When that happens to you, you just feel like there's nothing beautiful left in the world when someone does that to you. I felt so... I just froze. I didn't know what to do. I just couldn't speak. All I could do was just cry. No one asks for that to happen to them.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. And that's part of the rape culture, which I think we need to delve into much more. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Amy, that you experienced that.
I was so confused. And I just felt like I had this stain on me after that that I was never going to be able to wash away. I just wasn't okay for a long time after that. I just remember I went in the shower every day for a while, and I'd just be kind of like scrubbing at myself, and it didn't matter what I did. I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't shake. I couldn't get rid of that memory.
Cleansing yourself. I hear this, you know, what you're describing is the common response of victims and survivors of sexual assault. Unfortunately, the work I do as a psychotherapist shows that a lot when people come to you and talk about these experiences. And what you were describing is the classic response, Amy, to somebody who had experienced this type of assault, where, as you said, you were trying to clean yourself, right? I hear that often as well. Absolutely. And people are in shock. You put it aside. And it sounds like that's what you did, right? You just kind of, like, what did you do after that? You just put it aside, and because it doesn't sound like you talked about this or reported it to the police or anything like that. No.
No, I stayed silent about it because I just thought to myself, these people, they already think that I'm white trash. They've already called me white trash. They already don't think that I'm worthy of being a Muslim, of getting married, having a family. And that's how much I wanted those things in my life, how much I wanted to be a Muslim, how much I wanted a Muslim life. I pushed that down in me, and that was torture. And I just beg anyone who has ever found themselves in that situation or ever finds themselves in that situation, please don't do what I did. You have to speak out, because just because someone does that to you, it doesn't take away your honour. It doesn't make you any less of an honourable man or an honourable woman. I am an honourable woman, and God is my witness to that, and the Imam is witness to that as well. Nothing and no one can change that. And it was not the same for any of you who have gone through that. It doesn't change that. They are the ones that lost their honour in raising their hand and harming you like that, and that stain will stay with them for the rest of their lives, not with you. God will be with you.
Absolutely. Such powerful words, Amy, for somebody who, bless you, to have gone through that and to actually talk about this specific experience like that, and to still have that sense of strength and honor. Absolutely. The person who violates and hurts and attacks is the one with the lack of honor, not the person who is attacked. And this is something that I hear often within different diverse communities when it comes to sexual assault, how women will not, and even men, by the way, they get assaulted too. It's just obviously not spoken about the same way, because like, how does a man get assaulted? He should be physically able to, but it's very different. And, you know, inshallah in the future could explore this a little bit further, but we do need to understand that there is a sense of shame when somebody does get attacked, where they don't want to go and talk about it, much less to the police. And there's a whole process. And I know this firsthand with dealing with clients who are sexually assaulted, what they need to go through when they report it, when they have to relive it, they have to talk about it. But there's also support as well, where I know with my clients who experience this, they do have a sexual assault counselor to talk to. There's always the detective and the police teams that look and look after and try to protect, of course, but it's still scary to take that step to go and do that, or even to go talk to somebody about that. And it takes such courage to open up and talk like that. And I commend you for bringing this up, Amy. And you and I have spoken about this again and again in terms of how comfortable you are be talking about certain things, because of course, when we talk about experiences, it's almost like reliving the trauma. And that's not the intent here. We don't want to repeat it to intensify, but rather talk about it, to process it, to help others and be able to work through and move through it and on from it as that. And it sounds like you've been doing that. And when we take a look at validating these experiences, it's tricky, it's hard, and there's so much around it. You know, like I said, in the future, I want to explore this topic in more depth. But again, I commend you for speaking about this. And then I wanted to bring your attention to this question that somebody had sent in terms of, when did you notice that, in fact, it was abuse? Because we know that it's not all of a sudden. When we look at, for example, domestic violence situation, it doesn't necessarily just start off with hitting right away, but it works out in levels and steps before it gets to the point of physical abuse. So in your experiences, when did you actually notice that it was, in fact, abuse? And that's a great question that was sent in by one of our viewers.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I commend them for asking that. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Whilst I was in the midst of kind of all of this madness, I did miss important things. I did miss these warning signs, and it wasn't until really a few months ago when I really distanced myself from certain toxic people that I realized just how bad it was. Like, how I know that we said earlier that this kind of behavior that some people inflict on others, it's not normal, but I'll be honest, for a long time, it was normal for me. That was like not my daily life, that's a bit too dramatic, but like that became the norm for me in my life. But I think, and another thing as well is, I really do believe that there should be courses and there should be programs and talks and lectures where they actually talk about the signs of abuse for people to look out for, because I think that's useful for everyone, not just people who have been through abuse, but for everyone, so that they are prepared. So when these warning signs come, they're kind of armored and they're like, no, do you know what, this isn't good, I shouldn't be tolerating this. But yeah, it's like you said, it doesn't start out with physical or sexual violence towards you. It always starts on an emotional level. Right. If someone is so okay with insulting you as a person and what's important to you, if someone is very okay with crossing your boundaries, even though you say, like, I don't like that, like it when you do that, if they keep doing that and they keep kind of like apologizing and then just doing it again, that's another indicator as well, because these things, they just represent a lack of respect that they have towards you, which can lead on to these kind of, I don't want to say bigger things, but other forms of abuse as well.
Of course,
and gaslighting as well. I think in the recent years they've been talking more about this, and my experiences with gaslighting were things like these people saying to me, like, you're crazy, or like you're reading into it wrong, or you're
Mm.
overreacting.
This is classic. This is classic gaslighting that we hear across the board. Absolutely. And the fact that you experienced that, like you said, it started off with the mentally, and how it started impacting you. Can you tell me also what else? Now, I just want to quickly summarize what you said. From a psychotherapeutic point of view, is when you are in the situation, it's hard to think objectively. It's very subjective, so you can't see these certain things. Is when you're away from the circumstances and the toxicity, you have more of a clearer mind to see things. So it sounds like that's what you experienced. And we've also spoken about, again, I want to reiterate, this is not everybody. This is just a few individuals where they inflicted this. And again, it's really important, again, to separate the two. Another question that we had is, do you recall any warning signs that you find important for others to be aware of, which links in to what you were just saying right now?
Okay, yeah. So you really have to watch kind of how someone speaks. It's like, do they contradict themselves? I found myself in a few situations where I had someone, they would say something 1 minute, and then the next minute it would be like the complete opposite. Like that shows a lack of integrity in a person if they're doing that. Not only are they playing with your mind, but it's showing you that they might not have the same kind of moral compass as you. Because this is one thing that I've learned the hard way, is I try really hard to be a good person, but not everyone has the same heart as me, you know? And I think like a lot of people can relate to that as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And unfortunately, some people, they are on a level and you're just on another level, so to speak. So that's a really important thing to look out for. And also as well, alongside that, communicating with this person, like, are they difficult to communicate with? Can you talk to them about your concerns without them, you know, just judging you, putting you down, insulting you, or kind of like diminishing it and saying like you're overreacting, that kind of thing? These things, they're really, really important, because when you find yourself in this situation where someone's telling you you're crazy and they're insulting you, that starts to chip away at you. And once you're kind of like mentally being chipped away at, it's almost as if they can kind of get away with more. That's the thing. Like unfortunately, some of the people that I dealt with, they were very calculated. They were very...
manipulative.
Yeah, very manipulative. And I should have noticed that. Looking back on it, I can remember specific examples of like how I'd hear them speak about how like they would, you know, present themselves in front of other people. You know, they had a real awareness about that. And I should have thought like, hang on a minute, like it's like, who thinks like that, you know?
That's
like,
so ironic. That's so ironic, because again, the abuser or that person in that position, they want to show themselves out in front of society as one thing, but underneath it's another. And this is classic again, again, in terms of what to watch out for, what to look for, to going back and seeing it again. I see this all the time in cases of domestic violence where the abuser look like an angel, a saint in the community and society, yet at home what they're doing is they're beating their partner and their children, or they're depriving, or they're insulting, or so it's ironic to see the flip in the person, how they present themselves in society. And I remember a few months back, when, you know how you mentioned to learn about these things, we've done so many different programs through this medium that if you just go to the Muslim Counselor YouTube, Nasimco, and some other programs and groups that I worked with, we tackled these topics, especially the one on narcissism, with Sister Anisa Diab. There's one we did with Hajj, excuse me, Hussain and Rajab Ali, where we looked at slander harassment. That was a big one where we talked about this. And the Hajj himself said, of course this person's going to present themselves like that. Of course they're going to align themselves with the right people. These are the Hajj's words that I'm paraphrasing. Of course they're going to show themselves to be doing all of this great acts in society, when underneath they're dark, they're dirt, they're evil. And ironically, the profile, this is what I'm talking about, examples, what I've seen, and again with what the Hajj was saying, the profile of this person is again showing themselves to be one thing and another, and this person thinks there's nothing wrong with themselves.
Oh yeah.
They think it's everybody else.
You know, you remind me actually of this one incident where I confronted this person who had lied to my face for years, who had manipulated me, who had harmed me. And I said, how could you do this to me? And this person, and I remember very clearly, there were times where this person said to me, Amy, I'll never let anything bad happen to you again. Or, you know, I would never want to hurt you or hurt any woman. These were the direct words. And when I said, how could you do this to me? Do you know what he said? He said, Allah has guided me to this. Don't bring God into this. God isn't happy with anyone who harms,
who hurts. No. Again, this is classic behavior I see with the type of people who are in the position of being an abuser, the narcissist type. Yeah.
We're not holding back, are we? Let's face it.
Well, it just, when hearing you describe those words, I recall many times hearing it from other clients who've explicitly described what their partners have said to them, not just partners, but people that are in their circle or people at work, position of power, of abuse, right? So you hear the story constantly. I've seen it with my own eyes with people around me as well. So when you hear this rhetoric, it's a narrative that is common to, again, the profile of the abuser. For those people who want to learn more about that, again, I recommend go back and look at the different programs we did on the narcissist, on abuse, domestic violence. I got a chance to speak with a sister similar to what we're doing, Amy, on her specific situation of domestic violence. And she described what you're describing. And it's mind-boggling when you see, I'm almost at a loss of words, even though I've been doing this for such a long time. It never ceases to amaze me to hear of such people and how they behave. And we know these people, like you mentioned, they consistently step over your boundaries. So these are signs we want our brothers and sisters to look out for, the people that consistently step over your boundaries, right? How they contradict themselves, they're hard to communicate with, and they're quick to judge and put you down. And use words such as, you know, divinity to vilify their and validate their behavior, and that you're in the wrong and you're this. And I guess as a revert, that's even more of an abuse of power to say, because you've been not a lifelong, person in this faith, ABC. Oh, let's move on to the next question that was sent. How did you deal with this abuse?
Okay, so it was a long time coming, but I finally got to a point where I was like, enough. I have to stop this. I can't keep going on like this. And the best thing to do is to cut the people out of your life that are causing the toxicity and the abuse. Even if you care about them, even if you love them, you have to do that for yourself. You have to cut them out, because as long as they still have access to you, even if it's something just like messaging, something that seems very innocent, you can't let those kind of people have access to you and you have to cut them off, and it's difficult, like especially if you do care about someone. I've cut people off before that I used to pray for them every day.
So leaving the situation and the toxicity.
Yeah.
How else did you dealt with that?
So thankfully I've had some very supportive friends around me. I can't praise them enough, who have literally gone above and beyond, who have picked up the phone to me in the middle of the night when I've been crying my eyes out. I've had a friend who's talked me out of suicide multiple times. And I don't know what would have happened to me if she wasn't there. I'm so grateful that God put her in my life. But I also did get help as well. I really do recommend that if you relate to any of what I've been talking about tonight, anything me or Sister Berak has said, even if you're not a reaver, even if it's not exactly like this, I recommend going and seeking help with a therapist and finding the right therapist as well, because there are many different types of therapists, and sometimes you don't gel with a particular one, but you might gel with another. I still have weekly therapy, and even though I'm actually in a really good kind of headspace, my body and my mind, they were so damaged for a long time, but thankfully I really have built myself back up. It's another thing as well, alongside kind of the mental impact, it had a physical impact on my health as well.
Yeah, of course.
My relationship with food dramatically changed. It's kind of funny to begin with. At the beginning of my time as a Muslim, I used to overeat as a way to kind of comfort myself. But it's funny, kind of the more kind of these incidents happened, I went to the other extreme where I actually started to starve myself.
Wow.
And yeah,
that sounds like, sorry, just to quickly connect it.
Yes, okay.
Sarah, when she spoke about her bullying story, she talked about how she took her pain and reframed it in an unhealthy way through eating, and how she developed an eating disorder because of that. She overcame it, alhamdulillah, but how this type of pain can turn into that type of disorder. Absolutely. Yeah,
it was very serious. When I was at my lowest, I would go on average 2 or 3 days without eating a proper meal. And that wrecks your body so much. The longest I went was just over a week. And after that, where I barely ate anything. And as a result of that, for a long time, I just couldn't eat a proper meal. Even now, I'll be honest, I only have 2 meals a day. And I know that we're supposed to have 3. I know that it's not enough, but it's simply because the effect it had on my body. I've had to kind of reintroduce eating properly into my daily life.
It takes time.
It takes time. Yeah, it does.
Are you eating snacks and drinking lots of water?
I drink a lot of water. I've got a beautiful water bottle that I keep by my bed. That helps me a lot. I do like my snacks. I'm a chocoholic. I've always got an emergency supply of chocolate somewhere.
I meant healthy snacks. As long as it's dark chocolate, then we're good. Doesn't sound like it.
I do like dark chocolate. I do eat a lot of fruit, actually. I like pineapples. I like pomegranates. What my dad would call fancy fruit.
Fancy fruits. That's good. Healthy and sweet and gives you energy. That's what's important. It sounds like, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but always have an emergency supply of chocolate, because that's a lifesaver.
That's a given. That's a life hack. That always, I always crack jokes about when I don't like to bring too much chocolate at home, because then there are times where that's all you're going to have. Make sure it's dark chocolate, but then sometimes you're craving the other chocolate. And what I do is I find an expired bar, and I'll still eat it.
Oh, I've done that.
Expired chocolate is still good.
I was in the middle of Iraq, and I bought a Mars bar, which was like really out of date, but I still ate it. I had no regrets.
As long as it's like within 6 months, we're good. I still do the expired. Yeah, that's another topic to talk about.
Yeah,
Expired
that's
food
a
that's
hot,
being sold. Oh
that's
dear.
a whole other issue. But yeah, I
I'm
do
really
have to
glad to
address.
see that you had the support. That's great that you had that support. This is key for anybody who deals with abuse, like you were saying, who personally gone through the support and therapeutic process. It can absolutely take you from a place where you're feeling that pain and you're trying to deal with that pain in unhealthy ways, like you've described and what we've heard from other people, getting out of that toxic environment and working with a safe space and trying to learn how to manage triggers as well, right? So cutting oneself off, and this is a great tip that you're giving, to make sure that one cuts themselves off from the toxic environment. Now, I just want to add a little bit to that, Amy, and because sometimes I hear a lot from people saying, but I can't get out of this abusive situation because I'm in my parents' home, or I'm in with a partner, or I'm this, and that. And absolutely, it becomes really hard to leave that type of situation. However, there are ways to dealing with it, and with a therapist you can work on that, but it's the idea of not emotionally engaging with that person if you're forced to live with them, especially people who are living with their parents like underage, right? Or people who have no choice but to live with their family because of culture, because of finance and whatnot. And then I hear this so often working in a university. I hear this so often with young people and even in society, right? So it's really important when you are stuck in a situation and you can't physically leave that toxic environment, you have to learn how to disengage from emotionally engaging yourself. So not letting the words impact you here, but learning how to let it go out like that, but also having the safe space with proper supports to talk about them, right? So it's really important with that. And Amy, I know you were able to leave the situation. It gave you the opportunity to reassess yourself, take control of getting healthy again, and reassessing your thoughts and beliefs. And another question we have here says, what do you believe now and where are you? And I know this is a sensitive question, but I think it's important for us to understand, as what we've seen, where you were before in terms of what you described, the whole abuse and the thought process and what you were feeling. But what do you believe now and where are you now?
So in terms of what I believe right now, it's not really a straightforward answer.
Okay.
On the whole, kind of like the physical and mental scars of the abuse are pretty much healed with me, I would say. But it's left a lot of spiritual scars in me, and it wasn't an overnight thing, but just like gradually over time, I really started to feel kind of choked and suffocated, and I didn't feel okay in my religion anymore. Even though I do not have a complaint against God, I talk to God even now every day. If I go a day without talking to God, like, you know, I just feel it in me, like something's not right. I have no complaint about God, about the prophet, all the religion that he brought. I know that that's not the problem, but it's just, in my mind, it's like it's reached a point now where trying to practice Islam, it is incredibly triggering for me, where to the extent where a few months ago I tried to watch a majalis and I had a full-blown panic attack, and I just was terrified. My mom and dad had to literally like lie me down and calm me down because it invoked that kind of response in me. And
so it
that's
sounds
horrible.
like it. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
It's just, that's horrible because I loved my faith.
Yeah.
I still do. I
Bless
made
you.
out these last few months, I made out that I didn't care, but I did. And
Well,
I just felt
it
like,
sounds like you're in a journey. It sounds like you're in a journey. There's confusion and conflict at the moment, but it sounds like you're on a journey to understand what you went through and how to make peace with it. And you know, I just want to add to that, Amy, because that took a lot of courage to say, and to understand that when we look at abuse and trauma as a whole, putting faith aside at the moment, whatever you experienced in the situation, the environment that links it to the memory or the event that causes the trauma, it's normal that later on that something related to that situation, the environment, the society, or whatever, can potentially cause a trigger effect because of how our brain and neurons are wired, memory to an event and a trigger. And so what the brain does is when, and I see this, like I do a lot of trauma therapy, and I see this again and again and again. By the way, trauma therapy, I know this sounds strange, it's one of my favorite therapies to work with because it is so challenging. At the same time, there's so much rewarding going through this process of reprogramming, so to speak, your brain to separate the negative from a trigger, so that when you see something related to that, you no longer experience the same negative response. And it is incredibly powerful. And the fact that you said that you still are continuing your sessions, I commend you for that. And inshallah, in time, you will find your peace with the trauma and the triggers to find something that is healthy and good for you in terms of, because you expressed a lot of love in what you believe in the faith, but it just sounds like right now you're in a space where you are in a journey and you're trying to figure out what's the best place for you. And it's so important that we work on that actively within ourselves when we are conflicted with challenging things that can cause an internal crisis. And I think we all go through that, but not a lot of people talk about the internal crisis that they go through when it comes to, let's say, their trauma, when it comes to faith, when it comes to the journey that they're on. And I commend you for staying strong to work on this. And it's not easy to do. And I commend what you say in terms of you understanding it is not the faith, but it's the toxicity of certain individuals or the environment. So that's really important to just to disconnect, to separate rather, and to work especially on your therapeutic process. And for anybody who has experienced trauma related to whatever kind of incidences, to learn and work with your therapist on separating so that you can go back to what you love in a different, healthier way, right? Now, one of our questions here as we're ending from our audience is a really good one. I really like this question as it's very powerful, and from your experiences, or let me see here. I think I wrote the wrong message. 1 second. I don't have it written here, but I'm going to read it out loud and I'll type it out quickly. It says, do you have any advice for men and women in the same or similar situation?
I would say to anyone who relates to what I've spoken about tonight is you have to understand that you don't deserve to be spoken to and treated like that. Whatever you're going through, you need to see your worth. You need to pick yourself up. You need to see the wonderful things about you, because it's not okay to be treated like that. And please seek help. You are no less of a good or honourable person, regardless of what other people do to you, because that reflects how they are and not you. And also, I would really, really encourage, and I would really hope that in the future that more people are more forthcoming to come and share their stories, because this is the thing. I know that there were a number of people who didn't want me and Sister Berak to be sitting here talking about this tonight. And the only way to combat that is if more people come forward and share their stories on the platforms that are available. because this is the thing that unfortunately some people, they will try and stop survivors speaking out because they'll use the excuse of, oh, it makes the religion look bad, right? But it's the fact
it's not about the religion. It's not about the religion.
No, it's not about the religion. And the ironic thing is, the people that fight against this show or any show like it, they're the ones that make the religion look bad, because it makes it look like that they have things to hide.
Absolutely.
That's how it is. That makes the religion look bad. That's the ironic thing. And the only way to change the status quo is you have to shake the table. And yeah, it's not comfortable. I've not been in a comfortable position all of this week. Neither has Sister Berak, from the backlash that we faced. But we see in history all the time that whenever there is injustice, it always starts with one or two voices who are ridiculed, who are mocked, who are threatened, who are oppressed. But in time, those voices, they multiply. And great things come from that. And the only way for our men, for our women, for our boys and our girls to be safe is if we take action. We can't keep pushing this under the rug.
And standing up, just like we have said again and again, when it comes to bullying, harassment, domestic violence, all sorts of different abuse, we cannot stay silent, and we have to speak about it. And, you know, listening to people saying, oh, we're working on it, we're doing things, enough, khalas, bas, kafi hachi, as we say in Iraqi, enough talk, we need action. And again, I compare this to what we've seen with racism. For years, we've been talking about it, whether it's from a spiritual, religious perspective, from a political, a societal, a psychoanalytical, psychotherapeutic, whatever you want to call it. We've been talking about racism for years. But did anybody really take the initiative to get to the root of the problem to start changing things? No, they didn't. Until it came out the way it did this year. That's when our society actually started doing something about it as a whole. And then within different pockets of different societies and communities, because it impacted us on so many different levels, whoever we are and what communities we're from. And the same thing when it comes to these topics. This is not something new that we're doing here. I have again and again, and other people in my position have spoken about these topics, especially when it comes to how it impacts people on a mental health level. We do not want people to go and feel isolated, feeling that the only solution they have is to take their lives. We've had enough people in that position doing that. And then, of course, the whole taboo and misconceptions around people and their families who do end up taking their lives and putting the blame on, oh, they didn't have enough faith. Oh, you know, they were this, or this was happening, that. Enough with the excuses. We got to dig deeper into looking at the root of the problem, working on them, providing a compassionate space. And this is what this is to create a safe and compassionate space for people to be able to talk about what happened to them. And the way we did it is with a goal in mind, not to point fingers, not to tell this, and that, but to look at the issue so that we can start working on it. Last but not least, Amy, what message do you want to tell your abusers as we finish up?
Okay. I want to say that, do you know what? I'm glad that I didn't meet the criteria, the superficial criteria, I should say, that would have deemed me to be worthy of respect in their eyes. Because I'm proud of the fact that I will never be like them. And I don't know, I'm probably asking for too much here, knowing what I'm dealing with, but they should really think about what they've done and the consequences that it has. And they can hide behind their lies. They can hide behind their excuses. They can hide behind the people, but they cannot escape from God. God does not forget. And I have laid my cares and my complaints with God's hands, and I've laid them at the feet of Imam al-Mahdi, because he is the only hope that I have in leading a spiritual life, honestly. He's the only hope that I have left. And even though I'm not comfortable with religion at the moment, you know, for the reasons why I've discussed, I really believe in the world that he will make, because when he comes, all the so-called outcasts, the reverts, the divorcees, the single mothers, ethnic minorities, black people, all the people that are looked down upon in this ummah by a number of individuals, I honestly believe that the Imam is going to choose them to be alongside him, because we know the Imam, he wants to bring justice to this world. This world needs justice badly.
Absolutely.
And who is better to give justice than those people who have known injustice? I truly believe in the world that he will create, and I just hope I get to stand in the crowd one day and see him with his 313. That would make all of it worth it.
Inshallah, we all pray for that, and it truly comes with intention, with a lot of reflection. And again, thank you, Amy, for sharing your story. It took a lot of courage, and I know and understand that this is not going to please everybody. We're not doing this to please everybody or anybody, but we need to address these issues that are harming people mentally, harming people emotionally, psychologically, physically. And it's time we really truly talk about these things. And there has been, alhamdulillah, change and progress in terms of being able to discuss these topics, but we need to get more in depth and listening to the stories of survivors to be able to help other people. And in our segment today, we did take a look at what abuse is. We looked at it from therapeutic perspective. We looked at it from a lived experience perspective. We looked at the signs, what to watch out for, what to do about it, how to get support, how to work through it. And these are all the things that we can take into consideration as we move forward. And we are open to listening for your feedback on this, whether it's positive or negative. I'm open to it. But there also needs to be that understanding that these are topics we cannot shy away from. Because the more we push, like I said earlier, push and suppress and deny and ignore and just push under that rug, it will come out in a very, very harmful and negative way. And we want to control and manage the narrative in a healthy way for people so that they can overcome these and also still protect the image and reputation at the same time of people who are faithful practicing of our faith, because there are a lot of issues around that as well. But that wasn't the focus of our session today. It was to focus on abuse. And inshallah, we have accomplished that. Thank you again, Amy. This was a very challenging discussion, but inshallah, we did justice to the topic of abuse and your lived experience. And I pray nothing but goodness for you and the brothers and the sisters like you who have gone through this silently.
Yeah. And I want to, sorry to cut you off. I just want to say how grateful I am that you gave me this opportunity and you allowed me to come as I am, because a few months ago I prayed to God for justice for what I'd been through, and honestly tonight I feel like that prayer is being answered for me, so I want to thank you for that.
You got me all emotional now. I was holding off the whole time.
Sorry.
Inshallah khair. Bless you. Bless you. And Amy, you know, you and I have worked together before, and I had the opportunity to get to know you and work with you. And I never expected one day, honestly, talking about convert issues before, to one day be talking to you like this about your experiences. And I pray from the bottom of my heart, and all of those supporters I know who are out there, to pray for your healing And of course, your guidance as well. We pray genuinely from our hearts that you come back to what you fell in love with, but what is right for you without the triggers. I pray from the bottom of my heart for you. You're a beautiful soul inside and out, and nobody deserves to be abused and used like this. And may Allah, what else can we say? May there be justice, inshallah, may there be justice. And most importantly for you, find healing. Find healing. And we're here to support you in your journey, because part of why people leave or step away or the things that happen is because there's not that compassion and support. There's judgment, and it's very dangerous. And speaking somebody in the field and profession of mental health, it is very similar to people who are experiencing these mental health issues, and they're judged and they're isolated and they're pushed away rather than embraced and compassion given with no judgment to bring them back, as opposed to push people away with hatred, with gossip, with all sorts of manipulative behavior. That doesn't work. We have to embrace, and we have to use compassion and love and openness, so that way those who are struggling and suffering have that safe space and don't feel excluded, because the exclusion is what causes people to have anxiety and depression and suicidality. And this is the opposite of what we want. We want people to thrive and grow and, inshallah, be part of the society, absolutely, and be contributing, healthy contributors, meaningful contributors. Bless you, Amy. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of you who joined and sent in your questions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.